The dust storm rolled into White Pine, Nevada, on a Tuesday afternoon in late August of 1882, bringing with it a woman who looked like she had been traveling through hell itself. Jacob Lancaster stood on the porch of his ranch house, squinting against the grit that pelted his face, watching as the figure on horseback materialized from the brown haze like a ghost taking solid form. He could tell right away something was wrong. The rider was slumped forward, barely holding the reins, and as the horse drew closer to his fence line, Jacob's instincts kicked in. He vaulted over the porch rail and ran toward the approaching stranger, his boots kicking up small clouds with each stride. The woman slid from the saddle just as Jacob reached her, and he caught her before she hit the ground. She was lighter than he expected, all bones and exhaustion, her dress torn and filthy. But what made his heart seize was the bundle strapped to her chest, a tiny infant wrapped in what had once been a clean blanket. The baby was silent, too silent, and Jacob's mind raced as he carried both woman and child toward his house. "Help me," she whispered, her lips cracked and bleeding. "Please help my baby." Jacob kicked open the door and laid her on his sofa, his hands already working to untie the cloth that held the infant against her body. The baby was breathing, thank God, just sleeping, though its little face was red from the heat. The woman's eyes fluttered closed, and Jacob knew he had to act fast. He grabbed his canteen and carefully dripped water onto her lips, then did the same for the baby, who stirred and made a weak mewling sound. "Stay with me," Jacob said, his voice firm but gentle. "You are safe now. I have got you." He spent the next hour tending to them both. He had some experience with this sort of thing. Living alone on a ranch, 20 miles from town, taught a man to handle emergencies, and he had patched up enough injured animals and occasional drifters to know the basics. He got water into the woman, cool cloths on her forehead, and managed to get the baby to drink some water mixed with a tiny bit of sugar. By the time the sun started to set, casting long shadows across his simple home, the woman's eyes opened again, clearer this time. "My baby," she said immediately, trying to sit up. "Right here, doing fine," Jacob assured her, bringing the infant over. The woman clutched the child to her chest, tears streaming down her dusty face, leaving clean tracks on her cheeks. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you so much." "What is your name?" Jacob asked, settling into the chair across from her. "Tabitha. Tabitha Summers," she said. "This is my daughter, Emma." "Jacob Lancaster," he replied. "This is my ranch. You are welcome to stay until you are strong enough to continue on. Where were you headed?" Tabitha's face crumpled, and she looked down at the baby in her arms. "Anywhere. Nowhere. I was just running." Jacob waited. He had learned patience in his 30 years of life, especially in the 6 years since he had taken over this ranch from his deceased parents. People told their stories in their own time, and pushing never helped. "My husband," Tabitha finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He died 3 months ago. Pneumonia. We had a small farm in Utah, but when he passed, his brother claimed it. Said it was rightfully his since me and Emma were not really family." "That does not make any sense," Jacob said, frowning. "You were married to his brother." "Emma is not my husband's child," Tabitha said, and the shame in her voice made Jacob's chest tighten. "She is, but she is not. My husband and I, we could not have children. We tried for 5 years. Then Emma came to us. Her mother died giving birth, a woman passing through our town. She had no family, no husband that anyone could find. My husband and I, we took Emma in. We loved her like our own. But we never made it official through any court. When Thomas died, his brother said we had no legal claim to his property, and that I was just a woman with a bastard child who had taken advantage of his brother's kindness." The bitterness in her words was palpable, and Jacob felt anger rise in his chest at the injustice of it. So he threw you out. He gave me 3 days to leave. I took what I could carry, sold what little jewelry I had for a horse and supplies, and started riding. I thought maybe I could find work somewhere as a cook or a laundress, something that would let me keep Emma with me. But towns, they look at an unmarried woman with a baby and they assume things. They judge. I ran out of money 2 weeks ago. I have been living on what I could scrounge, trying to keep Emma fed and healthy. I thought we were going to die out there in that dust storm. Jacob stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. His ranch was not large, but it was profitable enough. He ran cattle and horses, sold them to the army and to ranchers passing through. He had 3 hired hands who lived in the bunkhouse and helped with the daily work. It was a simple life, sometimes lonely, but honest. He had been engaged once, years ago, to a woman named Sarah who had decided ranch life was not for her and left him for a shopkeeper in Carson City. Since then, he had kept to himself, focused on building something solid and lasting. "Stay," he said, turning back to Tabitha. She blinked at him, confusion clear on her face. "What? Stay here? You and Emma? I have plenty of room. I could use help around the house anyway. I'm not much of a cook and this place could use a woman's touch. You can work for room and board and Emma will be safe and fed." "I cannot ask that of you," Tabitha said, shaking her head. "You do not even know me." "I know you are a mother who nearly died trying to protect her child," Jacob said. "That tells me everything I need to know. Besides, every child deserves a father, including this one. Maybe I cannot be that exactly, but I can make sure she has a roof over her head and food in her belly and a chance at her real life." Tabitha stared at him, tears welling up again. "Why would you do this? For strangers?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Jacob said simply. "And because I have been alone too long. This house needs life in it again." The first week was awkward in the way that all new arrangements are. Tabitha was skittish, jumping at sudden sounds, always watching Jacob as if waiting for him to change his mind or reveal some darker motive. He gave her the small bedroom that had been his mother's, and he moved some furniture around to make space for Emma's cradle, which he built himself from spare wood. He was not a master carpenter, but the cradle was sturdy and safe, and when he presented it to Tabitha, she cried. "You did not have to do this," she said, running her hand over the smooth wood. "Babies need a proper place to sleep," Jacob replied. "That settles it." His ranch hands, 3 men named Pete, Miguel, and Old Sam, were curious about the newcomers but respectful. Jacob made it clear that Tabitha and Emma were under his protection, and that anyone who said an unkind word would be looking for work elsewhere. The men nodded and went about their business, though Jacob caught them smiling when Emma's laughter drifted out from the house during the day. Tabitha proved to be an excellent cook. She made meals that Jacob had not tasted since his mother was alive, hearty stews and fresh bread and pies made from the preserves in the cellar. She cleaned without being asked, organized the chaos that Jacob had been living in, and slowly, the house began to feel like a home again instead of just a place to sleep between long days of work. Emma was a happy baby, all giggles and grabbing hands. She was about 8 months old, Tabitha said, just starting to crawl and get into everything. Jacob found himself enchanted by her. He would come in from the fields covered in dust and sweat, and Emma would squeal with delight and reach for him. It made something in his chest warm and expand, a feeling he had not known he was capable of. One evening, about 3 weeks after Tabitha's arrival, Jacob was sitting on the porch watching the sunset when she came out and sat beside him. Emma was asleep inside, and the night was peaceful, the air finally cooling after the blistering heat of the day. "I want to thank you again," Tabitha said softly. "You have given us more than I ever hoped for." "You do not need to keep thanking me," Jacob said. "You earn your keep, you work hard." Still, she insisted, you did not have to do any of this. Most men would not. Jacob turned to look at her. In the golden light of sunset, with her hair clean and brushed, wearing one of the dresses he had bought for her in town, she looked different from the half-dead woman who had stumbled onto his property. She was beautiful, he realized, with her soft brown eyes and the gentle curve of her smile. The thought surprised him, and he looked away quickly. I meant what I said, he told her. Every child deserves a father. My own father, he taught me that a man's worth is measured by what he does for those who cannot help themselves. Emma did not ask to be born into difficult circumstances. She deserves a chance. You are a good man, Jacob Lancaster, Tabitha said, and there was something in her voice that made his heart beat a little faster. The summer faded into fall, and the work on the ranch intensified as they prepared for winter. Jacob and his hands rounded up the cattle, marked the calves, and made repairs to fences and buildings. Tabitha helped where she could, keeping everyone fed and the house running smoothly. Emma grew bigger, started pulling herself up on furniture, babbling in her own mysterious language. Jacob found himself looking forward to the end of each day, when he could come inside and find Tabitha cooking dinner, Emma playing on a blanket on the floor. They would eat together, and afterward, Tabitha would often sit with him on the porch while Emma slept. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, discussing plans for the ranch, debating the merits of various horse breeds. I always wanted a big family, Tabitha confessed one night. 4 or 5 children, a house full of noise and laughter. Thomas wanted that too. We tried so hard. When we found out it was not going to happen for us, it nearly broke us. Taking in Emma, it saved our marriage in a way, gave us purpose again. What was he like, your husband? Jacob asked. Kind, Tabitha said after a moment. Gentle. He was not a strong man physically. He got sick often, struggled with the hard work of farming, but he loved me and he loved Emma. He did his best. He was lucky to have you, Jacob said. I was lucky to have him, she replied, even if it was too short. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. Jacob wanted to say something, to tell her that he was starting to feel things he had not felt since Sarah left, but the words stuck in his throat. It was too soon, he told himself. She was still grieving. He had no right to complicate things with his own feelings. But as the weeks turned into months, those feelings only grew stronger. He found himself noticing little things about Tabitha, the way she hummed while she worked, the tenderness with which she cared for Emma, the laugh that lit up her entire face. He started taking more care with his appearance, washing up more thoroughly before dinner, wearing his nicer shirts. Pete noticed and teased him gently about it, but Jacob just shrugged and said nothing. Winter came to White Pine with its usual harshness. Snow piled up around the ranch, and the work became a matter of survival for both animals and humans. Jacob made sure the barn was secure, that there was enough hay and feed stored up. Tabitha kept the house warm and welcoming, always had coffee ready when the men came in from the cold. One particularly brutal night in January, a blizzard hit that was worse than any Jacob could remember. The wind howled like a living thing, and snow came down so thick you could not see 3 feet in front of you. Jacob and his hands had to rope themselves together to make it from the barn back to the house after securing the animals. They stumbled in half-frozen, and Tabitha immediately went to work getting them warm, wrapping them in blankets, pressing hot coffee into their hands. That was too close, old Sam muttered, his teeth chattering. Thought we were goners for sure. The storm lasted 3 days. The men stayed in the house rather than risk the short trip to the bunkhouse, sleeping in the main room near the fireplace. Tabitha cooked constantly, keeping everyone fed and spirits up. Emma, now walking and getting into everything, provided entertainment with her antics, chasing the cat around or trying to pull off old Sam's boots. On the second night, when Emma had finally tired herself out and everyone else was asleep, Jacob found himself unable to rest. He stood at the window, watching the snow swirl in the darkness. Tabitha appeared beside him, wrapped in a shawl. "Cannot sleep either," she asked softly. "Too much on my mind," Jacob admitted. "Want to talk about it?" He looked at her, at the concern in her eyes, and something in him gave way. "Tabitha, I need to tell you something, but I do not want to make things difficult or uncomfortable for you." "Jacob, you can tell me anything," she said. He took a deep breath. "These past few months, having you and Emma here, it has changed everything for me. This house feels like a home again. I feel like I have a purpose beyond just keeping the ranch running. I look forward to coming inside at the end of the day. I look forward to sitting with you in the evenings, to hearing about your day, to watching Emma grow. What I am trying to say, and doing a poor job of it, is that I have developed feelings for you. Real feelings. I understand if you do not feel the same way, or if it is too soon after losing your husband, but I needed to be honest with you." Tabitha was quiet for a long moment, and Jacob felt his heart sinking. He had ruined everything, he was sure of it. But then she reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm and soft against his work-roughened palm. "I have been feeling the same way," she whispered. "I did not want to admit it, even to myself. I felt guilty, like I was betraying Thomas's memory. But the truth is, you have shown me and Emma more kindness and generosity than anyone ever has. You took us in when we had nothing. You have protected us, provided for us, treated Emma like she was your own daughter. How could I not develop feelings for you?" Jacob felt like he could not breathe. "You mean it?" "I mean it," she said. And then she was in his arms, and he was holding her close, feeling the warmth of her against him. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other while the storm raged outside. They took things slowly after that. Jacob courted Tabitha properly, despite the fact that they were already living under the same roof. He brought her wildflowers when they finally appeared in spring. He took her on buggy rides into town, holding Emma on her lap. They would have lunch at the hotel restaurant, and Jacob would introduce Tabitha proudly as his intended. The townspeople of White Pine, who had initially been suspicious of the arrangement, warmed to the couple when they saw how clearly devoted they were to each other. In May of 1883, 9 months after Tabitha had first arrived at the ranch, Jacob and Tabitha were married in the small church in White Pine. Emma, now a toddler, stood with them at the altar, holding a little bouquet of wildflowers. The ranch hands were there, cleaned up and wearing their best clothes, along with most of the town. It was a simple ceremony but heartfelt, and when Jacob kissed his bride, there was not a dry eye in the church. The ranch prospered over the next few years. Jacob's herd grew, and he built a larger barn to accommodate it. Tabitha transformed the house into a true home, with curtains on the windows and a vegetable garden out back. Emma grew into a bright, curious child who followed Jacob everywhere, asking endless questions about the horses and cattle. He taught her to ride when she was 4, putting her on the gentlest mare and leading her around the corral while Tabitha watched with her heart in her throat. "She is a natural," Jacob told his wife proudly. "Got a good seat already." "She is too young for this," Tabitha fretted, but she was smiling. "I started riding when I was 3, Jacob said. "She will be fine. I will not let anything happen to her," and he never did. Jacob was as devoted a father as any child could ask for. He attended Emma's school performances, taught her to read and do arithmetic when the schoolhouse was too far to reach in bad weather, and told her bedtime stories every night. To anyone watching, there was no question that Emma was his daughter in every way that mattered. In the fall of 1885, Tabitha told Jacob she was pregnant. He was overjoyed, swinging her around the kitchen and making her laugh. Emma, now 6 years old, was excited about the prospect of a baby brother or sister. "I hope it is a brother," she announced at dinner one night. "I want someone to play cowboys with." "It might be a sister," Tabitha pointed out. "Then we will teach her to play cowboys too," Emma said decisively, and Jacob laughed. The pregnancy was not easy. Tabitha was sick much of the time, and there were days when she could barely get out of bed. Jacob hired a woman from town to come help with the house and cooking, and he took over much of Emma's care himself. He did not mind. Emma was his daughter, and caring for her was not a burden but a joy. In April of 1886, Tabitha gave birth to a son. The labor was long and difficult, and there were hours when Jacob feared he might lose her. But she was strong, his Tabitha, and when the baby's cry finally filled the room, Jacob wept with relief. They named him Joshua, after Jacob's father. Emma was smitten with her baby brother from the first moment. She wanted to hold him constantly, to help feed him, to sing him songs. Jacob watched his family with a heart so full he thought it might burst. This was what he had always wanted, even when he had not known to want it, this feeling of completeness and belonging. As Joshua grew, the differences between him and Emma became more apparent, but Jacob loved them equally and without reservation. Emma had dark hair and eyes like Tabitha, while Joshua had Jacob's sandy blonde hair and blue eyes. Emma was adventurous and bold, always getting into scrapes, while Joshua was more cautious and thoughtful. But they adored each other, and the house was constantly filled with their laughter and play. One evening when Emma was 9 and Joshua was 3, Emma came to Jacob with a troubled expression. He was in the barn, checking on a mare about to foal, and she climbed up on the fence rail beside him. "Papa, can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course, sweetheart. What is on your mind?" "Billy Martin at school, he said that I am not really your daughter. He said I am just some baby you and Mama took in." "Is that true?" Jacob felt his chest tighten. He had known this conversation would come eventually, but he had hoped for a few more years. He climbed up to sit beside Emma on the fence, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Come here, Emma girl. Let me tell you a story," he said. "Do you remember how I have told you about the day your mama came to the ranch?" "Yes. She was lost in a dust storm and you saved her." "That is right. Your mama came here with you, and you were just a tiny baby. She was scared and alone, and she needed help. I took you both in because it was the right thing to do. Now, it is true that I am not the man who helped bring you into this world. That was a different man, a good man who loved your mama very much. But he got sick and died before you could really know him. And before him, there was another woman who gave birth to you but died doing it. So you are right that you came to me and your mama in an unusual way." Emma's eyes were wide and beginning to fill with tears. "So I am not really yours." "No," Jacob said firmly, turning her to face him. "You listen to me, Emma Summers Lancaster. You are mine in every way that matters. I chose you. When your mama and I got married, I chose to be your papa. I have fed you and clothed you and taught you and loved you every single day since you were 8 months old. You are my daughter, and nothing and no one can change that. Blood does not make a family. Love makes a family. Do you understand?" "I think so," Emma said, wiping her eyes. "Let me put it another way. Do you love Joshua?" "Of course I do. He is my brother." "And do you think he is less your brother because you do not share the same father from birth?" "No," Emma said, looking shocked at the idea. "Exactly. Family is not about where you came from. It is about who chooses to love you and stand by you. I chose you, Emma. I will always choose you. You are my daughter and I am your papa, and that is that." Emma threw her arms around his neck, hugging him fiercely. "I love you, Papa. I love you too, sweetheart, more than you will ever know." From that day forward, Emma never questioned her place in the family again. She held her head high when other children whispered, secure in the knowledge that she was loved and wanted. Jacob made sure she never doubted it, telling her often how proud he was of her, how much joy she brought to his life. The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and triumphs. There was a drought in 1888 that tested everyone's endurance, and a harsh winter in 1889 that killed off a portion of the herd. But the family weathered it together, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating the good ones. In 1891, Tabitha gave birth to another child, a daughter they named Rose. Emma, now 12, was an enormous help with the baby, having learned from Joshua's infancy how to change diapers and warm bottles. Joshua, at 5, was less interested in the baby but accepted her with the easy tolerance of a child who had always been surrounded by love. The ranch continued to grow. Jacob bought more land, hired more hands, and built a reputation as an honest dealer who sold quality livestock. People came from all over Nevada and beyond to buy his horses and cattle. He was respected in White Pine, known as a man of his word who treated his family and workers with fairness and kindness. Emma grew into a beautiful young woman, with her mother's grace and her father's sense of honor. She was an excellent rider and could rope and brand as well as any of the ranch hands. Jacob worried sometimes that she was too wild, that she would never be content with the traditional role expected of women, but Tabitha just laughed at his concerns. "She is finding her own way," Tabitha told him. "That is all we can ask. Let her be who she is meant to be." When Emma was 16, a young man named David Porter started coming around, the son of a neighboring rancher. He was clearly smitten with Emma, and she seemed to like him well enough. Jacob watched their courtship with a mixture of pride and sadness, not ready to let go of his little girl but knowing it was inevitable. "You be good to her," Jacob told David one day when the young man came to ask permission to court Emma formally. "She is precious to me. If you hurt her, you will answer to me." "I understand, sir," David said, looking nervous but determined. "I care about Emma very much. I would never do anything to hurt her." "See that you do not," Jacob said, but he shook the young man's hand and gave his blessing. Emma and David were married in the spring of 1894, just after Emma's 18th birthday. It was a bigger celebration than Jacob and Tabitha's wedding had been, with half the county in attendance. Jacob walked Emma down the aisle, and when he placed her hand in David's, he had to fight back tears. "You take care of her," he whispered to David. "I will, sir, I promise." Emma hugged Jacob tightly before stepping up to the altar. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered, "for everything, for choosing me." "It was the easiest choice I ever made," Jacob whispered back. The young couple settled on the Porter Ranch, but they visited often, and Emma remained close to her family. She gave birth to her first child, a son, in 1895, making Jacob a grandfather at 43. He held the baby boy and marveled at how life moved in circles, how he had gone from being alone to having more family than he had ever dreamed possible. Joshua grew up to be as capable as his father, taking over more and more of the ranch operations as Jacob got older. He was patient with the animals and the workers, firm but fair, and Jacob knew the ranch would be in good hands when he eventually passed it on. Rose was the family artist, always drawing or painting, capturing the beauty of the Nevada landscape in ways that amazed everyone who saw her work. In 1900, Jacob and Tabitha celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. They sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and red. Emma was visiting with her 3 children. Joshua was working with the horses in the corral, and Rose was inside cooking dinner with her mother supervising. "Did you ever imagine this?" Tabitha asked, leaning against Jacob's shoulder. "When you took in a half-dead woman and her baby all those years ago?" "No," Jacob admitted. "I just knew it was the right thing to do. I had no idea it would lead to all this. To you, to Emma, to Joshua and Rose, to grandchildren, to a life so full and rich I sometimes cannot believe it is real." "Do you have any regrets?" Tabitha asked. "Not a single one," Jacob said, kissing the top of her head. "You and Emma, you saved me just as much as I saved you that day. Maybe more. I was so lonely, Tabitha. I did not even realize how lonely until you both filled up all the empty spaces in my life." "I love you, Jacob Lancaster," Tabitha said. "I love you too, Tabitha Lancaster. Always have, always will." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jacob thought about that dusty afternoon in 1882 when a stranger rode into his life. He thought about the choice he had made to help rather than turn away, to open his home and his heart. It had been the defining moment of his life, the pivot point on which everything else had turned. He had told Emma all those years ago that every child deserved a father, and he had meant it. But what he had not known then was that sometimes a father deserved a child just as much, deserved a family to love and protect and build a life with. Emma had not been his by blood, but she had been his in every way that mattered from the moment he caught Tabitha falling from that horse. She had made him a father, made him a better man, and he would be grateful for that gift for the rest of his days. The years continued to pass in the peaceful rhythm of ranch life. Jacob and Tabitha grew older together, their hair turning gray, their steps slowing but their love remaining as strong as ever. They watched their children and grandchildren grow, celebrated births and weddings, mourned losses when they came. In 1905, Jacob fell ill. It was nothing dramatic, just a gradual failing of his body as age caught up with him. Tabitha nursed him with the same fierce devotion she had always shown, and their children gathered around. Emma came and stayed for weeks, bringing her youngest child with her. Joshua and Rose were there every day, helping their mother, keeping their father comfortable. One evening, when the house was quiet and everyone else had gone to bed, Emma sat beside Jacob's bed holding his hand. "Papa," she said softly, "I need you to know something." "What is that, sweetheart?" Jacob's voice was weak, but his mind was still sharp. "I need you to know that you gave me everything. A home, a family, a father who loved me unconditionally. You showed me what it means to be truly good, to help others without expecting anything in return. I have tried to live my life by the example you set, to pass on to my children the values you taught me. You chose me when you did not have to, and that choice changed everything. I would not be who I am without you." "Emma," Jacob said, squeezing her hand as hard as he could. "You were the greatest gift I ever received. You made me a father. You made this house a home. I would do it all again in a heartbeat, exactly the same way. I am so proud of the woman you have become, of the mother you are, of the life you have built. Never forget how much I love you." "I never will, Papa. I promise." Jacob recovered from that particular illness, rallying with the resilience that had carried him through decades of hard ranch life. He lived to see 2 more grandchildren born, to celebrate his and Tabitha's 25th wedding anniversary, to teach his grandsons to ride the way he had once taught Emma. On a warm summer evening in 1908, Jacob Lancaster passed away peacefully in his sleep, Tabitha beside him as she had been for over a quarter century. He was 66 years old, and he died surrounded by the family he had built through choice and love rather than merely blood. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, from ranch hands he had employed over the years to businessmen from as far away as Carson City, from neighbors he had helped through hard times to children he had taught to ride. Emma spoke at the service, her voice strong despite her tears. "My father used to tell me that every child deserves a father," she said. "He said that to me when I was 9 years old and questioning my place in his life. He told me that he had chosen me and that love made a family, not blood. He lived by those words every day. He chose to love, chose to help, chose to build rather than destroy. He was a good man, the best man I have ever known, and I am honored to be his daughter." Tabitha lived for many more years after Jacob's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She never remarried, content with the memories of the love she had shared with Jacob. She told stories about him constantly, keeping his spirit alive for the younger generations who had never known him or only had dim memories. Emma took over the running of the ranch, working alongside Joshua. Together they built on the foundation Jacob had laid, expanding the operation while maintaining the principles of fairness and integrity their father had instilled in them. The Lancaster Ranch became known throughout Nevada as a place where a person's word was their bond and where hard work was rewarded. Emma's children grew up hearing stories about their grandfather, about the day he took in a woman and baby he did not know and gave them a home. They learned from those stories, absorbing the lesson that kindness and generosity were not weaknesses but strengths. That family was something you built through love and commitment. In 1920, Emma stood in the cemetery in White Pine, looking at the graves of both her parents. She was 41 years old now with grandchildren of her own. She had lived a full and happy life, and it had all started because one man had chosen to help rather than turn away. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered, placing flowers on his grave. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for teaching me what love really means. I hope I have made you proud." The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers, and Emma felt at peace. She had been chosen, had been loved unconditionally, and that gift had shaped everything that came after. She had passed it on to her own children, teaching them the same lessons about love and family that Jacob had taught her. As she walked back to her horse, Emma thought about that dust storm in 1882, the one that had blown her mother into Jacob's life. It had seemed like disaster at the time, but it had really been the beginning of everything good. Her mother had always said that Jacob was sent by God that day, an angel in cowboy boots who had saved them both. Emma believed it. She had to believe it, because the alternative was that life was random and meaningless, and she knew that was not true. There was purpose in what Jacob had done, in the choice he had made to open his home and heart. That choice had rippled out like waves in a pond, affecting not just Emma and her mother, but everyone who came after, creating a legacy of love that would last for generations. The Lancaster Ranch thrived for decades more, passing through the family line, always maintaining the values that Jacob had established. The original ranch house, where Tabitha had first laid her head when she was half dead from exposure, was preserved and cared for, becoming a symbol of the family's history and heritage. Emma lived to be 73 years old, dying peacefully in 1952, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She had been loved and respected her entire life, known throughout Nevada for her kindness, her business acumen, and her unwavering dedication to family. At her funeral, her oldest grandson spoke about her father, about Jacob Lancaster, and the choice he had made one dusty afternoon in 1882. "My great-grandfather believed that every child deserves a father," he said. "He proved it by taking in my grandmother when she was just a baby, loving her as his own, building a family based on choice rather than blood. That lesson has been passed down through our family, reminding us that love is something we choose every single day. We choose to show up, to care, to sacrifice for those we love. That is the legacy Jacob Lancaster left us, and it is one we strive to honor every day." The story of Jacob and Tabitha Lancaster became part of White Pine's history, a tale told to illustrate the best of what people could be. It was a story about compassion and courage, about seeing someone in need and helping without hesitation or expectation of reward. It was a story about how one moment, one choice could change everything. In the end, Jacob had been right. Every child did deserve a father, including Emma. And Emma had deserved Jacob, the man who had looked at a stranger's baby and seen not a burden but a gift, who had opened his heart wide enough to encompass a ready-made family, and then built upon that foundation a life of meaning and purpose. The love story of Jacob and Tabitha was epic, not because of grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but because of the quiet, steady devotion they showed each other every day. They had built something together, a life and a family that lasted beyond their own years, creating ripples that touched countless lives. And it had all started with a dust storm, a dying woman, and a man who believed that doing the right thing was reward enough. Jacob Lancaster had said every child deserves a father, and then he had become exactly the father Emma needed, proving through his actions that family was not about biology but about love, commitment, and the choice to show up every single day. That was the real story, the one that mattered. Not the dramatic rescue or the hardships overcome, but the daily choice to love, to protect, to provide, to be present. Jacob had made that choice every day for the rest of his life, and in doing so, he had created something beautiful and lasting, a legacy that would endure long after he was gone. The ranch still stood, generations later, a testament to what one man's kindness could build. The descendants of Jacob and Tabitha Lancaster continued to live and work there, raising their own children with the values they had inherited, passing on the story of how it all began with a choice, a simple decision to help someone in need. Emma had been right to thank her father, right to honor his memory, right to pass on his teachings. Jacob Lancaster had been a good man, perhaps a great one, not because of wealth or fame, but because of the love he had given so freely, the family he had built so carefully, the example he had set so consistently. Every child deserves a father. Jacob had said it, believed it, lived it. And in doing so, he had become exactly the kind of father every child deserves, the kind who loves without condition, protects without hesitation, and chooses family every single day. That was his legacy, and it was a good one, the very best kind, the kind that lasted forever in the hearts and lives of those he had touched.